Hi, my name is Dr. Catherine Hughes from Crime Psych. I am a criminal psychologist and I run a business that enables me to bring knowledge to everyone, not just those who are at universities, schools and colleges, and I do this by producing a range of blogs, vlogs and free online courses. I do also run some slightly more in-depth courses, both online and face-to-face. You don't need any previous qualifications to learn with me, and there are several subjects available. Once you've finished watching this video, head on over to my website and take a look to see if you can make it to an event or learn online in your own time. This particular video is looking at David Pomphret. He has to be the most unlikely killer I've ever done a profile of. He hit his wife, Anne-Marie, over the head with a crowbar near their home in Cheshire in November 2018. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. As I said, this is the most unlikely murderer I've ever come across. He seemed to all to be a genuinely nice man and was well liked by family and friends. David Pomphret was an IT specialist who worked for Barclays Bank. He was described as a quiet, unassuming man. During his trial, the victim's mother, Carol Buckley, said that David was an angel and that he deserved a medal for putting up with Marie. She also said, "I couldn't have wished for a better son-in-law or dad for Megan, their daughter." She described her daughter Anne-Marie as the driving force in the relationship. Miss Buckley also said that her daughter could easily take the huff, as she put it, blocking her on Facebook over something that she'd said, and that 3 years before her death, she'd been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which can affect a person's social skills. Kenneth Crane, who was Miss Buckley's partner, said in a statement, "Marie I would describe as a Jekyll and Hyde character. She was like a volcano. She could erupt at any time without warning. I would describe David as a very quiet bloke. He never talked or wanted to chat." The picture that's emerged during researching this murder is that Anne-Marie Pomphret was aggressive and abusive. Megan Pomphret, their daughter, said that her mother would insult her father with the most horrific language. She described her father as the calmest man on the planet. She said that sometimes a switch would flick with her mum, and she said all hell would break loose. "My mum's not the easiest person to get along with some of the time." She said that her father taught her how to handle her mother. She said it's really good having a dad who's really supportive like that. Megan said that there were times when her mum would throw her toys out of the pram and her dad would go after her, and she's seen the error of her ways and then came back and calmed the situation down. As I've already mentioned, Anne-Marie was diagnosed as having Asperger's syndrome. The press picked up on this at the time and inferred that her aggression was because of this condition. Asperger's syndrome is part of autistic spectrum disorder. Those with Asperger's syndrome tend to have average or above average intelligence. People with Asperger's syndrome see, hear and feel the world differently to other people. They have difficulty interpreting other people's emotions, thoughts and their body language. Although those with autism and Asperger's can experience a great deal of anxiety, there's no proven link between autism and violent behaviour. Anne-Marie's mother said that they married in 1997 and they shared an interest in horses. As you've already heard, she spoke very highly of the man who killed her daughter. She would have known firsthand just how difficult Anne-Marie was to live with. Anne-Marie was violent and aggressive. She would verbally abuse both Megan and David. Yet David Pomphret appeared to manage fairly well, and because of his calm nature, always managed to diffuse these situations. Before the day of their murder, he'd never retaliated in any way. Depending on the newspaper that you read, the tone of the article is very, very different. The Liverpool Echo showed a picture of the pair shopping in Asda earlier in the day on the day of the murder, saying, "This is the moment killer David Pomphret and his tragic wife Anne-Marie were snapped casually shopping in Asda supermarket just an hour before he brutally murdered her. The calculating 51-year-old used a metal crowbar to brutally strike her skull up to 30 times at a remote horse stables the couple owned in Warrington. On the day of the murder, they go shopping and then they go to their stables to see their horses. They began to argue about picking tools up to do some DIY. David Pomphret said she called Megan a fat slag, didn't like the clothes she was wearing, too short, too revealing, he added. She said that I was a crap parent, encouraging Megan to go out on a Saturday night. The only reason Meg was going out was for sex. She ranted at me for being a bad parent, calling me effing useless. She called me limp and useless. He said, it's a bit embarrassing. I've been having erectile dysfunction. I was not performing very well. Marie, at this point, was raging, he said, absolutely raging, finger pointing, screaming. She then slapped me across the face. I remember reaching out, grabbing her hood, and I don't remember the rest, he told the court. The next thing he remembers is standing over his dead wife's body. He added, he'd used a crowbar to hit his wife over the head. Because of the extent of the injuries, it's impossible to determine the exact number of blows, but it was thought to be around 30. He later told the court, I was standing at the side of her body. There was blood on my hands and on the crowbar. She was on the floor, he said. I just killed my wife. I was just horrified. Up until this point, it's possible to argue that he snapped due to the years of abuse and violence. This could have been a momentary lapse of control, and it could have been argued that he was simply attempting to defend himself. I know if anybody said anything that derogatory about my children, I would certainly retaliate, although I wouldn't have gone as far as David Pomphret did. I know that I don't normally include so many details of the case, as I do prefer to stick to the psychology of the behaviour. However, in this case, I feel that knowing the background and the details of the crime helps you to understand how such a mild-mannered man became a murderer. I believe it also helps to clarify why this is a case of murder and not manslaughter due to a temporary loss of control. He was a man who'd been ground down, attacked and humiliated over many, many years. Perhaps if the gender roles were reversed, more people would have been sympathetic to someone who'd suffered years of abuse. However, it is following actions that make this murder rather than manslaughter. David Pomphret cleaned the weapons of blood. He threw the crowbar into a pond, and that was discovered a week later when the police drained the water away. He stashed a hammer down a rabbit hole. He burned his t-shirt in an incinerator, and he placed his trousers and trainers into a plastic bag which he threw onto the embankment of the M62 while cycling between the crime scene and their home. He also rang and sent concerned text to Anne-Marie's phone. He was arrested the next day, and at first he denied killing his wife. He initially said that she'd not returned home and he went looking for her. When he found her, he dialed 999, saying he'd found his wife lying in a pool of blood. He said, she's very dead, adding, it looks like she's had her head beaten in. But it was only later in court that he admitted trying to cover up the killing by burning his clothes. Whenever there's a murder, it's most likely that the victim and the perpetrator know each other. Stranger murders do occur, but they are quite rare. Police always begin by investigating whoever was closest to the deceased. They examine those who had access to the victim and motive to kill. After being arrested and released on bail, he was interviewed several more times. He was interviewed 15 times and maintained his innocence throughout it all. He finally changed his story and admitted to killing his wife once he was faced with undeniable evidence of her blood on his socks, meaning that he was at the crime scene. The socks would have been examined by forensic and showed a pattern of blood spatter that's consistent with blood moving through the air rather than the blood dripping on them when he was near her body. He claimed in court that he had a momentary loss of control due to the abuse and should therefore be convicted of manslaughter and not murder. However, his behaviour following the killing isn't consistent with somebody who has a temporary loss of control. These are the actions of a rational human being doing all that they can to get away with a crime. I can empathise to a degree with someone who's suffered years of verbal and physical abuse. I know that Anne-Marie did have mental health problems and she was suffering Asperger's syndrome. However, that doesn't make her behaviour any easier to deal with. I've spoken to many domestic abuse survivors who've said that they've fantasised about killing their abuser. Simply leaving the relationship isn't always a viable option. I can understand a person getting to a point where they can no longer take the abuse and snap. However, I cannot and will not say that this is in any way a justification for killing another person. Thanks for watching this video. I do hope that you found this psychological analysis interesting and informative. I hope that you've learned something from it. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.